I'm Jaime. I'm the Director of Exhibitions and Public Programs here at CCA, and I'd like to welcome you to our Four Freedoms Constitution Day Town Hall event. This is our kickoff event for the Four Freedoms program here at CCA, and we'll be sharing more about that throughout the night. But we chose today, Constitution Day, to launch CCA's Creative Citizens in Action series and our partnership with Four Freedoms. Founded by CCA alum Hank Willis-Thomas and artist Eric Gottesman, Four Freedoms is a platform for civic engagement, discourse, and direct action for artists in the United States. Inspired by American artist Norman Rockwell's paintings of Franklin D. Roosevelt's Four Freedoms, which is from a speech from 1941, that are freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. And Four Freedoms uses art to encourage and deepen public explorations of freedom in the 21st century. And so our theme tonight is really looking at freedom is, as it connects to the Constitution, the First Amendment, and also to some of the goals of the Four Freedoms Initiative. Tonight, our agenda includes a Constitution Day introduction by Associate Provost Julie Kirgis, reflections on the statement "Freedom is" by four esteemed CCA faculty, and time for group reflections and discussions. So please think ahead. We want to hear from everyone who's here and have a participatory discussion toward the end. And then we'll finish it off with a collaborative lawn sign making workshop. You can see a preview of some of our lawn signs here. This is one of the core pieces of Four Freedoms, and we'll be making lawn signs that will then be displayed across CCA's two campuses in the coming days. I would like to let everyone know that we are recording tonight's presentation. We're both live on Instagram Live, and we're recording this for our archive. And the discussions will also be recorded. And thank you for being here. This is the most important part for us all to be in dialogue together tonight. So thank you for making time for that. And now I'd like to welcome up Julie Kirgis.
Hi, I also would like to say welcome and thank you for being here. I'm Julie Kirgis, Associate Provost for Faculty and Academic Partnerships at CCA. And this is my first fall semester here, so I'm really excited to be here. I'm really fortunate this semester to have an opportunity to teach at CCA as well, and it's been a joy the first few weeks of classes. The class that I'm teaching is called The Ethics of Resistance, and we've been talking in the first couple of sessions about what we mean by ethics and what we mean by resistance. And as we've talked about that, we've talked about the values that underlie the ethical decisions that we might make, and how that might lead us to resist certain things, depending on what those values are. And today, for Constitution Day, we actually talked about the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, and what values we thought might have been undergirding the thinking of the founders when they instituted those first 10 amendments. So to kick us off, I'm going to read you the First Amendment in just a second, but I also wanted to tell you that the reason that we celebrate Constitution Day, I did not know, but in 2004, Senator William Byrd of West Virginia was concerned that people didn't really understand the Constitution very well and didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it. So he stuck a couple sentences into a law that went into effect, and starting in May of 2005, it became a law that all institutions of higher learning that received federal funding, which we are one, are required now to celebrate Constitution Day. So here we are celebrating Constitution Day, thanks to Senator Byrd of West Virginia, to help us understand what this is all about and what it stands for. So Amendment number 1 of the Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And one of the things that I was thinking this afternoon about that is that this talks about the freedoms that we each have and the protections that we have under the Constitution, each of us as individuals, and it's really important that we exercise those freedoms and those rights. But it's also about all of our freedoms. And the really key important factor that we're also responsible for guarding those freedoms for everyone, for everyone in this country, no matter how you got here or why you're here. And that's part of this conversation, is how do we talk about what freedom is for ourselves individually and also for all of us. So tonight we're going to hear from 4 CCA faculty, Shylah Hamilton, Jaime Knight, Christine Wang, and Michele Carlson, and they can each introduce themselves. So I would like to allow Shylah to come up and have her turn now. Thank you for being here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shylah Hamilton. I am the chair of diversity studies, and I'm also an assistant professor in the first year program. I want to say thank you for having me, and thank you for being here with me. I'm really happy to be here, and I want to share a little bit about what freedom is to me, and I hope that later you can share what freedom is to you as well. So freedom is, what a lovely prompt. I really thought about this quite a bit, and it took me a while to figure out what to say, because freedom means so much to me in so many different ways. So I wrote down a few things. Does anyone recognize this photo? Seen it before? Let me tell you a little bit about this photo. This is a photo of Edward Crawford. It was taken by Robert Cohen of the St. Louis Dispatch. In this photo, we see Edward Crawford throwing a tear gas canister fired by police. In his other hand, he's holding a bag of chips. The police were trying to disperse protesters in Ferguson, Missouri on August 14, 2014. Edward Crawford was protesting the murder of the unarmed 18-year-old Michael Brown Jr. by a 28-year-old police officer, Darren Wilson, in the city of Ferguson, Missouri. Ferguson, Missouri is a suburb of St. Louis. Officer Wilson said that he shot Michael Brown as he ran away, but the autopsy shows that he was shot 6 times from the front. His body lay in the street for 4 hours. This is reminiscent of lynchings during the Jim Crow era, when bodies were left to hang in trees for all to see. Ferguson community members said that this act was a message from the police, and it meant, quote, "We can do this to you any day, any time, in broad daylight, and there's nothing that you can do about it." We may think of lynching as in the case of Emmett Till. That's what's in our popular culture discourse. It was 1955 when Mamie Till allowed the nation to see the mutilated remains of her lynched teenage son, Emmett Till. No one was convicted. 50 years later, a filmmaker named Keith Blanchard created a documentary called The Untold Story of Emmett Lewis Till. It uncovered evidence that Till's accuser, Carolyn Bryant, had lied. Although too much time had elapsed for Bryant to face prosecution, that film led to the passage of Emmett Till Unsolved Civil Rights Crimes Act. For nearly 3/4 of a century, thousands of Black people, including over 100 Black women, were lynched in the presence of or with the complicity of law enforcement. Not only could Blacks not testify in prosecutions against whites, local officials often refused to indict, lying in the official record that the victim died, quote, "at the hands of parties unknown." We academics and artists are very familiar with the lynching postcards sold as souvenirs that told us a much different story. Edward Crawford, here in this iconic photograph, was a 24-year-old St. Louis resident who took to the streets with his community to protest the killing of Michael Brown. In an interview, he said he threw the tear gas canister not deliberately towards the police, but because it had landed near children. On May 5th, 2017, a short 2 years after this photo was taken, 27-year-old Edward Crawford committed suicide. They say he shot himself in the back of a police car. I must note that his family does not believe that to be true. According to a 2010 Centers for Disease Control and Prevention report, suicide has become the third leading cause of death for Black men between the ages of 15 and 24. Even more troubling is what experts say makes Black men and Black peoples in the Western world so prone to developing depression and eventually committing suicide. Constantly being faced with racism and discrimination is causing even more Black people and Black men, Black boys, Black girls, to become depressed. It often goes untreated in the Black community, and it can often end in tragedy. Black boys are more depressed because they believe their physical safety is always being threatened. Socioeconomic challenges combined with a lack of appreciation being expressed for Black lives is driving depression rates and taking a serious stab at the psyche of Black peoples in the Western world. If you make someone feel like you don't even care if they're alive or not after police altercations, how do you think they're going to react after years and years and years of telling someone they don't matter? Isn't it akin to saying, well, if you don't care about my life, why should I? African American children are taking their lives at roughly twice the rate of their white counterparts. Our identity, we know, begins to solidify in adolescence. When a child or adolescent internalizes that he or she is less than others or that she does not belong because of the color of his or her skin, this can be psychologically damaging. Ideally, we want our children and youth to feel empowered, to feel like they can accomplish anything that they put their minds to. However, there are institutions and misguided individuals in our society that aim to instill in us that being Black is unacceptable. These tragic deaths, the anguish of their families and the turmoil within their communities, which are our communities, are all salient reminders that the United States is still far from being a racially just and equitable society. These failings are broad and deep. They are reflected in the long-standing and seemingly intractable realities of unequal treatment, circumstance, and opportunity for African Americans and other communities of color. They pose a difficult yet increasingly urgent challenge, not only in regard to seeking justice for Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, Sandra Bland, my cousin Jordan Davis, but also in working to redress the widespread and daily harms associated with race-based inequities in law enforcement and other areas. I should note, there is a type of racism for Black men and boys that is particularly harmful. And it's not that Black women and girls don't face racism, but the stereotype of Black men is criminal and violent. It amplifies threats to their personal safety. Black boys have less room to define themselves and their identity on their own terms, and this can lead to significant mental health problems. The stereotypes are often used to justify police shootings in our public discourse. You're probably wondering, what does this have to do with freedom? Well, I have 3 nephews. They range in ages from 1.5 to 7. The classically trained pianist and beautiful vocalist and one of my dear inspirations, Nina Simone, said, freedom to her meant no fear. I want my nephews to grow up without fear. I want them to love who they want, to claim whatever identities they want, to walk down the street without fear. So freedom is, for me, no fear.
Thank you, Shylah. That was powerful. Not quite as thoroughly prepared, maybe, but my name is Jaime Knight. I teach in the print program and the first year program, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this image that I took at Badger Flat in 2015. And this is an image of the 54th annual Satyrs Motorcycle Club motorcycle run in Badger Flat in the Sierras outside of Fresno, California. And the Satyrs Motorcycle Club is one of the oldest gay motorcycle clubs in the United States. It's the oldest, the longest running, continually running motorcycle club, gay motorcycle club. I was living in LA starting in 2014, and I got involved in a project with another artist, and part of that project was an investigation into an archive of a different motorcycle club called the Blue Max Group in Southern California. And my work over the past decade or so has been about an investigation into, I guess you could sort of say, the queer experience, queer history, queer subjectivity, and really trying to think through what it means to be queer in America, to be a gay man in America today, and also as a reflection of what it meant to sort of be a closeted youth in the 80s in Albuquerque, Mexico. Sort of through this work, I've thought a lot about sort of the presence of gay men in America, and I think in terms of thinking through the idea of freedom is, I think that there's sort of a lot to think about in that. One of the things that I really sort of yearn for, in a way, in my life is the freedom that existed for gay men in the years between the sexual revolution and before the AIDS crisis. And at that time, there was a lot of really generative action and theory around queerness. And I always liken it to, I feel like in that time, gay people were saying, let us show you something different, let us show you a different way to live. And sort of post the AIDS crisis, it became, look at how we can be just like you. And I think that those are two very different and distinct things. So for me, I think freedom is the freedom to live differently. And whether that means through your sexuality or as an anti-capitalist or as an antisocial or as a gender nonconformist, I think that all of those things are really important. And I think that for me, one of the things, and part of why this image is so important to me is in that context is because in 2015, as part of the research for this project that I was working on about the gay motorcycle clubs, I went to Badger Flat. And there were a lot of old dudes there. And a lot of those old dudes had been going since, the 70s. And one of the things that I heard from those older gentlemen was that they joined the motorcycle club and they started going to Badger Flat because it was the only place that they could truly live how they wanted to live. And so thinking about communities and what it takes to live your freedom in an oppressive environment, I think is really important. And I think that is a little bit also what Shylah was talking about. And so talking to people about community and why they sort of taking yourself out of society in order to live your freedom is kind of what this image means to me. And again, I actually wrote in my notes, freedom is living without fear. And I think that's maybe this will be the theme. And I don't actually think that, I don't think that we live in freedom, right? And so maybe that's why this forum is so important. And I'm really, really lucky to be a cisgender, white presenting man, I think, in the world right now. And I think that we can talk about sexual freedom, and especially here in the Bay Area, it's really easy in a way to believe that we have this kind of sexual freedom and freedom to be who we want to be. But I also believe that we have to remember that there are trans women of color being killed all of the time. There are gay African Americans who can't or don't feel comfortable being out in their community. There are people all over the world. There are places all over the world where it's still illegal to be and act as a homosexual. And so I think, in some ways we're all lucky to live in this sort of supposedly enlightened place that we live. But I also think that it's important to remember that where we are is a privilege, and how we live is a privilege, and that freedom that we feel here is not felt. So I think that's about all I really have to say about this image. And I would encourage, I would actually encourage people to go to this thing, or the Satyrs are around. They're in San Francisco, and you can see them. They are visible. And so talk to these guys, because they have done something and are doing something that has changed the lives of a lot of people. So, I guess to go back to it, I would say that, to echo Shylah, freedom is living without fear.
Hello. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I am going to put my camera on. No. Okay. Next slide. Hello. Okay. This is my painting. I did not choose a photo because I'm a narcissist. Thank you for. This painting is from an art show I did that opened October 17th in 2016. The title of the art show was Devotional Art for Your Home, and I made paintings in the style of like Northern German Renaissance paintings, because I thought this is a very uncool style of painting. Like, this style of painting has not been in fashion for hundreds of years. So I decided to paint in that style of painting because I felt, because I had been organizing with Critical Resistance, which is a national prison industrial complex abolitionist group, and it didn't feel cool. Like, it didn't feel, in 2016, it didn't feel like there was a mass interest in PIC abolition. Like, the tools that we were using, flyers, I didn't think that we used social media well. I didn't think that we were doing things like in a with the newest technology. So I felt really frustrated. So I wanted to like connect old style painting with what I perceived of as old style organizing, and the same kind of belief that I needed for both. Like every time I went to a CR meeting, I was like, I believe that this matters. I believe that this is going to change stuff. I believe that even though we're fighting, like a $3 billion jail plan in LA, that these 6 people in this room like matched up with 20 people in the other organization, matched up with 100 people in the coalition, matched up with thousands of people in LA County can make a difference. Like that was my belief, I mean, it still is my belief, but. So this whole show, by combining this style of painting with the subject matter of organizing in LA, was trying to make this comment, what does it mean to believe in civic engagement? What does it mean to believe in a community of people? And what does it mean to believe in something like that you think is right? You know what I mean? So this painting is called The Coronation of Police Chief Beck. It's painted after March 2016 when there were homeless sweeps in LA County. Basically, there was a city ordinance called 5611 where any homeless person who had more than 50 gallons of stuff on the sidewalk had to get their stuff thrown away. So the police department and the sanitation department would go around the streets of Skid Row and downtown LA and take people's stuff and throw it away, because it was because like we saw with the Nazis, like hygiene and population control were like married together. You know what I mean? So here we have the sanitation department truck, and I have the 24 elders holding up signs that say hungry and homeless. They're like, please help God bless. And I wanted it to be an exercise. I wanted this painting to be an exercise in radical imagination, right? Like the Catholic left was this huge voting body that was very progressive for a long time, until the Republicans picked abortion as a way to split the left Catholic voting bloc, So it used to be that Catholics were extremely progressive and they could imagine Christ in everybody, right? Like they could imagine the body of Christ in a homeless person. They could imagine the body of Christ in someone who's in prison or who's being oppressed, or the sex worker or whoever, right? But because of a turn in right-wing politics, that Catholic radical imagination, I thought I'm mourning, like it's mournful to me to think about it. And so like I wanted my paintings with the Christian ideology to like refer back to a radical imagination. So I guess the like freedom that most I gravitated towards was freedom from want. So I was thinking about like, how can we be free if we don't have our basic needs met, right? Like our basic needs for shelter, our basic needs for food, our basic needs for physical safety, for economic security. And that's why I picked this image. The show opened October 16th, 2016, before Trump got elected. And after Trump got elected, the show looked totally different in my mind. Like, before Trump got elected, these looked like old-fashioned paintings to me. They looked like kind of a little bit sardonic or ironic, or a little bit like kind of bitchy, for lack of a better, like giving up in a way. Like, I don't care about being relevant, basically. But then after November 8th, I thought that the paintings were actually like kind of helpful, right? Because as a prison industrial complex abolitionist, I don't believe that prisons will be abolished overnight, but they will be abolished at some point, right? And so to think about a long-term idea of social justice, one that's beyond 4 years, one that might take hundreds of years in the making, was helpful to me. Like the paintings and the show actually like somehow was able to like comfort me and my friends, in the sense that I could say to them, look, we have to work hard every day, and we have to think about the future, not in terms of 4 years, but in terms of 40 years or 400 years, right? We have to think about how hard it was to fight for the abolition of slavery, how hard it was to fight for the civil rights that we do enjoy, all of the people who died, who believed in these things, these freedoms that we now enjoy, you know, and like not get discouraged when one asshole gets elected, you know. We just have to like keep working. So I'm really excited about working towards freedom with y'all. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you to all of my esteemed colleagues. It's I think, a really interesting conversation, and I'm going to be talking about the freedom to imagine. So it's kind of a nice kind of ending point. Also thinking about the freedom of fear as being, I think, a key part of the freedom to imagine. Also, Christine's mention of radical imagination. And I'm going to be, I'm Michele, Carlson. Please forget that. I teach at BCS, Visual and Critical Studies, and I'm the Executive Director of Art and Practical. And I'm going to be reading today a piece, kind of a work in progress. It's an essay, it's a personal reflection on the experience I had this summer on a commune. And I don't really live that commune life, so that's kind of, imagine you're in the redwoods in this commune. Utopia is for white men who can afford it. That's what was running through my mind during a 4-day retreat this summer with a group of art world adjacent colleagues. We had gathered to stay on a repurposed, return to the land 1970s commune turned artist project in Mendocino County to consider different topics around support and sustainability in an art world 30 years into the future, set against the backdrop of thick redwoods. The romance and nostalgia of going back to the land and a simpler time permeated the property. It was perfectly rustic and rugged, paused in time. You couldn't have designed it more ideally so. There was no running sewer lines, so we relieved ourselves in private outhouses, most of which emptied into a bucket that we mixed with sawdust and ash, that we later carried through the woods and dumped into a handcrafted humidor, which, if you don't know what a humidor is, don't look it up. Don't go in or search it. In a year, our waste would be compost for food to stock the communal kitchen. To be on this land was to feel deep and basic sustainability. To grow, cook, and eat your own food, then schlep your own waste across a steep hillside so it may later nourish the food you would grow, cook, and eat was an arduous and jarring tutorial in basic life. I was keenly made aware of my own body and its 21st century proclivities, What I ate that day didn't just disappear down a clean porcelain toilet that someone else became responsible for. If I lived on this commune, my waste became my burden that would come to sustain my life. Unsurprisingly, emphasis was put on creating as little waste as possible, not unique to even the most city of city life when we live in the San Francisco Bay Area. Composting, recycling, and practical environmentalism are a part of the everyday, but biological women from the city produce waste, and that weekend I happened to have my period. I anxiously packed excessive handfuls of tampons and different size maxi pads and shoved them into a gallon-sized Ziploc bag, along with a set of sheets, several towels, 5 rolls of toilet paper, and extra plastic bags, just in case. I wasn't going to be the woman who messed up utopia. Upon arrival, we were sherped down a steep trail by a commune regular and settled into our cabin. It was the largest and the only one fixed with an outdoor bathtub and shower. He gushed over the euphoria of taking a bath and the dreamy decadence of the standalone tub tucked into the tangled greenery that doubled as a shower curtain. I saw myself standing exposed outdoors, washing my own menstruation from my lower self for all to see, soiling the water that would flow into this land. The commune began out of the spirit of the 1960s. Vietnam War protesters, draft dodgers, those looking to escape conformity, consumerism, and the culture of hate, sexism, racism, and homophobia. It was an embrace of nature and environmentalism outside of mainstream society. The current owner of the commune explained this history to us with a healthy dose of skepticism and awareness of the irony that in this case, for one to leave capitalist culture, one must also have the capital and know how to purchase and live off of 20 acres of land. I am seduced by this return to the land lifestyle, but also cannot ignore the discomfort of the same past that has made today possible. I have a different relationship to the land. It is at the heart of Black and brown people's violent imperialist and colonialist histories. This is my land, but is also the lens through which I might construct any future. I wrote this from my home in San Leandro that was once a lonely land until it wasn't. Later, Chinese immigrants built the railroads that opened up the West until they were officially excluded from immigrating. San Leandro would become an agricultural region formed by Japanese and Japanese Americans until they became too good at it and were banned from owning any land at all in 1920. 20 years later, they would be relocated from the very land they had so successfully worked and fed the nation that now imprisoned them. Romanticizing this return to is to forget that the Vietnam War was many things to many people. It is to be the discomfort of another commune guest whose family were refugees and part of the 2 million Vietnamese who fled their homeland after the war on treacherous journeys by boat, the majority of which did not survive. The commune founders also fled, led by their opposition to the Vietnam War that manifested by turning away from it, opting out of society as an act of protest in order to build their utopic fantasy. Isn't the very nature of utopic communal life frustrated by the simple fact that not everyone has the opportunity to simply opt in or the luxury to opt out? To go back to is a phrase that has come to symbolize my San Francisco Bay Area life. At the heart of this has been a return of food and culture-based practices that work to thwart capitalism and hyper-consumerism's rampage on the earth and our bodies. To eat local, embrace slowness, buy and grow organic, cook at home, pick and can your own fruit, walk, unplug, to go back to the land, to go back to a time when it was simpler, to go back to when we lived off what we needed. But to go back to is not my freedom to imagine. To go back to means to conjure and reinvent a time when I would have been less free, where bodies like mine were violently enslaved and disenfranchised, even if labels like organic, single origin, or local were not yet needed, because that's what everything was. To go back to a time that was simpler is to go back to a time when I would have had no choice but to work the land without ownership or agency. We do not all have the same access to capital to simply start anew or leave the messy behind. Capital, I might add, that is often thanks to generational wealth, largely grown through familial land holdings. It wasn't until the late 1960s, around the same time land was being purchased for this commune, that racial discrimination concerning land ownership was legally prohibited. I cannot afford to forget those parts of the return to. even if it is in service of imagining a new future. To go back to is not my freedom to imagine. It is particularly complicated for histories and trajectories of Asian and Asian American immigration and assimilation, where xenophobic epithets like "go back to your own country" or "go back home" are definitive to our racialized experience. To go back to never means a suburb in Michigan or an upper middle class neighborhood in Seattle, but an imagined Asian land, no matter how many generations your family has held US citizenship. The last night on the commune, I stood in my outhouse with the door propped open to capture a bit of the moonlight in the tight structure. I was worried about messing up the bucket or accidentally staining the plywood surfaces. My gaze shifted between worried looks to the ground and staring up at some of the brightest stars I've seen in California. The darkness of that sky, unburdened by the lights of the city, was space that felt both heavy and freeing. It was as if a star-flecked, heterotopic blanket had been placed over the treacheries of the land. Both past and present become indistinguishable in that commune outhouse, on land that men have long used to envision a future and keep it their own. In this moment, looking up past that which is of the land into space, I hope for a speculative future that is more than a utopic return. A future where nostalgia is a tool we can use to learn from and leverage the past, not simply a space to revisit parts shrouded in metaphors about land and plagued with a strategic forgetting. Space has yet to have a human history, only our attempts to get there. Might we all have the same freedom to imagine new life, even if it is unknown? To get there, I will schlep my mess, carry the burden of discomfort and the exhaustion of knowing, because the land has never been free to me, and my body is the mess utopia can't afford. Thanks.
Let's do another big thank you for all four of our speakers. All right, and now we'd like to invite members of the audience. We're going to be putting microphones up that are near the aisles that people can walk up to. And we'll also be bringing some chairs, and we'll invite all the speakers in a second to come back up. And, really the goal of, what makes this a town hall is to really, create discourse around civic participation, around the ideas of freedom. And part of that is we really want to hear from all of you who are here. Speakers are also welcome to, pipe back in and respond to one another's work as well. We will ask you to speak into the microphones because we are, live streaming and trying to record this for the archive. So please be aware that the event is live streaming recorded, so you will be recorded if you speak in the microphone. But we really hope that some of you do so, and we invite you to make your own response to the prompt, freedom is, and describe what freedom is to you. But you're also welcome to give up a comment, maybe a response to what one of the speakers has spoken about. You're also welcome to ask questions of the speakers or other audience members as part of that. So we have one microphone located over here. We have one microphone here in the aisle. And then I'm going to pull some chairs out for the speakers. So please don't be shy. We'll do discussion for 15 minutes or so, and then we'll transition over and make lawn signs together that we can put up at CCA.
It's such a conundrum because it feels so elusive, it just seems like freedom is always out of reach, we can never touch it. It's always out there. It just seems kind of far from reality. Maybe we can have a microsecond, at home, in our bathtub, or in our yard, or at the beach, or something, just something, but it just seems so elusive to me. It's so far from the galaxy that I live in, so it's just funny. It's a connection. I hate to be so cynical.
I said, let me have it. No, then it's not there. Oh, no, not for you. Not for you. Not you. Who's it for then? Who feels freedom? I don't know. Being an artist, maybe. If that's the moment, feel free a little bit. We all want it, but we can't get it.
I mean, I guess so what you're saying to me is kind of interesting to think about, Michele. Your essay, because you were talking about utopia, right? And so, like, utopia, the thing about utopia is that it doesn't exist, right? There's no such thing as utopia. And so freedom, like true freedom, maybe is really just is a utopic drive that then engages us to always be reaching for it. And that's what motivates us to do the kinds of work that we do or whatever. And so, you know, maybe freedom is unattainable.
I mean, it doesn't mean it's not worth fighting for.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I fight all the time. I relate to Christine, and it just seems like you fight all the time in different ways. And I have a fire. I always have a fire. Never have enough fire, that's for sure. I'm gonna keep on going.
I was listening to you talk, Christine, about having freedom from want, and I thought of something that related to me as a student at CCA. So you were saying student from the basic human needs like housing, shelter, and nutrition, and I'm guessing transportation as well. And I think that's something for us working class students that we're in a way struggling here at CCA to get as well. And so I think also like Kim, you were talking about how freedom seemed to be so like aloof and not reachable. I was thinking of something that could be attainable for us as students, you know, like freedom from student debt, for example, freedom to have access to quality and accessible education and not have to struggle while you're getting it, or to have to go through all the hoops just to have the same access that comes so easily to other people. So this is what I'm thinking about when we say freedom of want, to be able to be educated and not have to struggle for it. Thank you.
I guess I have the mic now. I wasn't intending to have the mic, but I do have it. But yeah, I mean, I think what Rivka said is true, because I think that while freedom in the grand scheme might seem elusive, there are smaller models of freedom that we can strive for. I think that that's the thing about freedom, is that it's messy when you start to think about it in the abstract, but once you start to ground it in the achievable things and the things that you can control, or that you can find control in, like trying to attain these specific things, like you said, you know, freedom from want. We can find different ways where we can achieve freedom from want in our society. There are models for these things. We see these things exist in other governments, and we can take them and apply them to even if it's not our government as a whole, in the microcosms of governments like institutions, schools. There are ways, even businesses, we can apply these things, these models. And I think that's a good way to think about freedom. How can we apply them on a small scale? Think about it in a small scale on what you can control, and then think about applying it, growing and expanding and consuming the whole thing, One step at a time.
I was going to state this for the immigrant speak out, but I was thinking about what freedom is in preparation for this, and I for me, wondering whether I would have the freedom to live in my home. And then now it's also freedom of movement and to leave and to come back, because if I leave with him, I will lose my rights, or he will lose his rights, and therefore I will lose my rights here. So for me, freedom is to live with the people you love in the place that you want to be freely. And I know that isn't really a response, but it's also, it is a freedom of movement and to feel confident to move within the town, across the borders of a town, despite, the bureaucracy that exists and the systems that exist that might make you feel unsafe. So that does connect, especially to Shylah's.
I wanted to respond to that. I want to thank you for saying that, because especially with this administration, one thing that for people who have family members or loved ones that are outside of the country, the idea that you may not be able, or we may not be able to enter back into this country is a real fear. And I think that it's a fear that a lot of people take for granted. Especially with this, the news reports of Mexican Americans at the border, and their passports being, their U.S. passports being taken and then being incarcerated, right? Like, there's I just really appreciate you saying that.
So I don't want to be so negative, so I'm being more positive. Freedom to have the 1 million people in the San Joaquin Valley to have drinking water. Freedom to have drinking water in the state of California. That's important. I really do. 1 million people, 300 times.
It's not the only theme that's come up, but one of the things that I'm hearing is an understanding of freedom is in tension with fear, right? Because their fear is an obstacle to freedom. And I'm not sure that that matches my own view of that, either for myself or for my kids or for my students. There would be something more like, certainly for the faculty, I believe, that I feel like a lot of the time the freedom that is most precious to me is the freedom to run risks, is the freedom to try to do something that might fail, which is always scary, right? Like there is something about the trust in the larger system building, whether that be a person or an institution or a system of government or a passport or whatever it is, that some capacity to trust that somewhere out there is a limit that will say it's going to be okay. Where it's is part of the imaginative equipment that we need to be able to risk failure. The freedom to fail is a know that you will be allowed to survive. The freedom to fail and expect that there will be a meal or a roof or a hand or whatever it is. I think maybe the most fundamental to me, and for me that's actually very closely related to part of the First Amendment that we talk about less here, which is freedom of religious expression. Because ultimately that's about belief. It's not necessarily, to me, the most important thing is whether you have what we call a religion, but rather the freedom to choose what you put your faith in. And to have some reason to believe that will be returned. We will be here for everyone.
Doesn't that connect to the radical imagination? And so we're in a room full of artists and makers and writers and designers, right? So we all embody and have embodied that fearlessness of creation. right? And so maybe that's where, in that space, that's where the fear can dissipate. That's where we can build a community, no matter what that community may look like. That's where we can build that support system so that folks have food and transportation and childcare and all of these different things, so that we can keep creating. Because what we do is really powerful. We can change people's perspectives.
I wanted to add to what you were saying, or you were just saying now too, is that I was sort of framing my notes, kind of freedom of expression, but meaning that if one chooses to live a different sort of life than seems to be required by the currency of capitalism, that is pretty difficult to do it, and it's especially difficult to do it in a way where you're just recognizing the students that whether it's fear or insecurity or social state that are struggling with that, but recognizing that all of us also, whether it's faculty or staff, are struggling with that fear and feeling that, even if lucky to have stable living situation, et cetera, and a studio in my backyard, but there's a sense of oppression over the last 5 years or 10 years or so from the boom that's going on now, and this kind of oppression that we can't live, and whatever simply means. Like I really took your point, in your essay, of this looking at this history of what, where did the communists come from, where does the land come from? The big question seems always like, where is the land? Who owns the land? Could we have freedom from land ownership? might be a goal. But this ability to do something different, like to have an art education, and then be able to go and live with that kind of creed is, I would still love to have that freedom and feel like that's very threatened right now in our society.
So the little freedom of kind of got me to come here and see if some flesh could be put on this bone is this phrase that came to me of freedom of interdependence. And I actually don't know fully what that means, but it came very strong. I actually think I can credit folks in the disability justice community who I've been working with and hanging out with for kind of moving my consciousness more in that rich direction. I feel like I did a lot of pieces that echo that here, so I very much appreciate that. And I'm feeling that piece of damage that I got in our culture, that freedom's about being an individual, freedom's about what you want, freedom's about self-protection and a kind of security that's very individualistic. And I had a little bit of a fear of like, that's not what this is going to be like, because I'm coming to CCA and they're going to provide something else. But I can feel that bit of damage about like fear is this strident, individualistic, manifest destiny. And I'm feeling like the pain and the damage that's done to us. And so I think that I really want to hold this freedom of interdependence and figure out more about what does that mean? What does that look like? I appreciate your contribution.
That's great. I love that. I have to say I was worried too. I thought it was like going to be super libertarian. Like, we want our rights and we want them now. And we want all these rights. And we want all these rights, these millions of rights, and not do anything about it. So anyway, I was worried too.
We're not like this. We want the freedom to bear arms.
Yeah.
maybe that's a point where we can continue our conversations together afterward. So I did just want to take a minute to introduce some of what's going to be happening this fall related to Four Freedoms and the Creative Citizens in Action series at CCA. So if you guys want to, I'll give you a lie off stage. I'll share a little bit and then we can jump into our lawn sign making. The CCA is a proud partner of the Four Freedoms Initiative, and I mentioned earlier that Four Freedoms was founded in 2016 by a CCA alumni, Angeles Thomas, as well as an artist, Eric Gottesman. And they started as a super PAC to really look at kind of artist-generated, political activism and civic participation. And that's now grown into a larger campaign that's focused right now on the upcoming midterm elections. Really to use this time as kind of a time to prototype different forms of political activism that then can be rolled out into another initiative for the 2020 election. And so this all started as a conversation with Hank probably back in February, where he approached CCA and said, how can CCA be involved in Four Freedoms and how can we kind of help each other with this initiative? And so I'm excited to announce that we were able to partner with Micah in Baltimore and actually name Hank as our CCA's very first Creative Citizenship Fellow, which means that he will be spending some time at CCA this fall, working with us on different initiatives tied to the Four Freedoms 50 State initiative that they've launched. But then also at CCA, we have the chance to be kind of a Bay Area organizing hub for the 50 State initiative and can hopefully then pass some of what we learned back to Hank and the Four Freedoms team so that they can refine other forms of getting involved. And one of those is the lawn signs, which we will be making. But I did want to take this moment and do a plug for some upcoming events that we have. We do have a Take Action exhibition, which will be at the CCA Hubble Street Galleries, and we have an opening reception on Tuesday, October 23rd, and Hank will be in town October 22nd through 26th at CCA. We'll be visiting a lot of classes, working with students, working on projects, and coming to events. We also have another town hall that will be in San Francisco that is called Embrace Your Freedoms, Know Your Rights, and that's being organized by faculty member Erin Gash, who's here in the back. And that'll really be a hands-on Know Your Rights workshop training meant to empower artists and designers with information that will help with protest, that will help if you're approached by the police, that will actually give artists and designers tools as a way to really look at this freedom from fear and think about how if we're armed with knowledge, then hopefully that means that there is less fear. So I hope you mark your calendar. I also want to promote our Immigrant Speak Out that's coming up on the 21st of September, so that's this week, which is in the San Francisco Campus Center from 12 to 1, is that right?
1 to 3.
Sorry, 1 to 3 p.m. SF Campus Center across from the A2 Cafe in San Francisco, and that's the Immigrant Speak Out. And all of these events are part of what we're launching at CCA this week called Creative Citizens in Action. And this is really a college-wide initiative looking at civic participation. So this involves the libraries who have a fabulous display of reading material that's over here on stage that we hope you all take a peek at. And that will be in both CCA libraries for people to look at and check out. It involves Student Life, who will be leading other lawn sign making workshops and events around campus. It involves faculty like Kim Otto and Suzanne Cockrell, whose classes will be presenting an exhibition connected to the Take Action exhibition and are leading events like the Immigrant Speak Out. It involves marketing and communications and the materials that they're putting together for press and talking about kind of what CCA does. So we're really hoping that it involves everyone on CCA's campus, especially students and faculty. So if you have any questions, there will be giant posters with kind of our first set of events for Creative Citizens in Action for this fall. But this is something that we're hoping to continue even longer than that. And with that, maybe someone can come down here and turn the lights up for us. We will be handing out lawn signs, or anyone's welcome to come down and grab some of these that say freedom of. We have pens that we will be handing out to everyone here. And we would love it if everyone would think about, the prompt kind of freedom of, and then fill in the blank. There's no wrong answer. And then allow us to keep these lawn signs, which will be placed around both CCA campuses. We'll have them in Mackey Lawn here in Oakland, and we'll also have some in windows throughout both campuses because San Francisco